They say a smile can hide 1,000 sorrows. On Christmas Eve, 1854, I proved it could conceal something far more dangerous, a plan to burn an empire to ashes, while its kings slept peacefully in their beds. My name is Ruth. I am 38 years old. I have served the Caldwell family of Natchez, Mississippi for 23 years, and tonight, as I pour their wine and arrange their polished silver, as I listen to their laughter echo through this grand dining room, I am counting down the hours until I take everything they cherish and turn it into smoke. But I am moving too fast. Let me begin where all great fires start, with a single spark of injustice so sharp it can set a soul ablaze. It was 3 weeks ago, November 28th, when they burned my husband alive. Samuel, my Samuel. 39 years old, tall and strong, with hands that could repair anything broken, except the cruel system that owned us both. They accused him of stealing a silver pocket watch, a watch that Master Caldwell's own son had misplaced in a drunken stupor by the river. Samuel never touched it. He could not have. He was with me that entire evening, fixing the fence behind the quarters. I remember because we spoke about winter coming, about how the wind would slip through every crack in our cabin walls, about how we would have to pack the gaps with moss and mud once again. Simple talk, survival talk. The kind of quiet conversation that fills the space between heartbeats when you are trying to find small pieces of joy in a life that offers almost none. But facts do not matter when you are property. Truth becomes whatever your master declares it to be. And Master Caldwell declared that Samuel was a thief. More than that, he said Samuel must be made an example, must be punished in a way that would be remembered, must burn. I was forced to watch. We all were. Every slave on the Caldwell plantation, 147 souls, lined up in rows as the sun sank on that cold November evening. The air smelled of wood smoke drifting from the quarters and the promise of frost. Children sobbed until their mothers quieted them with trembling whispers. Old men stared at the dirt, having witnessed this kind of horror before, knowing exactly what was about to happen. Young men tightened their fists and felt the weight of chains they could not break. Master Caldwell stood on a wooden platform with his entire family beside him. His wife, Evelyn, thin and cold as winter winder. His 3 brothers, James, Thomas, and William, each carrying the same cruelty in different faces. Their wives, silent women, who had learned long ago that mercy was seen as weakness. And his eldest son, Robert, 23 years old, and eager to prove himself a man through violence. 8 adults in total, dressed in their finest clothing, as if attending the opera instead of a killing. The younger children were kept inside, spared the sight, but not the lesson. They would hear about it at supper. They would be taught that this was normal, that this was justice, that this was how you kept order over people you believed were less than human. Master Caldwell's voice carried across the land, strong and steady and completely certain of his righteousness. "Let this be a lesson," he announced. "Theft will not be tolerated. Disobedience will not be tolerated. You are property, and property that steals deserves to be destroyed." He spoke for several long minutes, turning Samuel's death into a sermon about discipline and order and the so-called natural hierarchy of the world. He quoted scripture, he quoted law, he cast himself as the hero and Samuel as the villain. I stood in the 3rd row, held firmly by 2 other house slaves who knew I would run to Samuel if given the chance, not to save him. There was no saving him, but to die beside him. To refuse to continue in a world this wicked. They gripped my arms tightly and whispered, "Live, Ruth. Live. Bear witness. Remember." So I stood. I bore witness, and I remembered every single detail of what they did to the man I loved. They drenched Samuel in lamp oil first. 3 full buckets poured over his head and body until he was soaked, until the sharp smell of petroleum overpowered everything else. I can still smell it now, weeks later, that sickly sweet scent mixing with the autumn air, the smoke from the cabins, and the heavy sweat of 147 people forced to watch murder and call it justice. Samuel looked at me across the crowd. We were perhaps 30 feet apart, yet it felt like miles. He did not cry. He did not beg. He did not give them the pleasure of seeing his fear. He simply looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw everything we had built in 15 years of marriage. The stolen moments of happiness, the whispered dreams of freedom we would never see. The quiet conversations before dawn when we pretended, just for a few minutes, that we were human beings instead of property. The nights we held each other and believed, however briefly, that love could survive even here, even in this hell, even in chains. Then he formed 2 words with his lips. Live, free, not live, not goodbye, not I love you. Live, free. Those were his final words to me, shaped silently by lips that would never kiss me again, spoken without sound because even his voice had been taken. Live free, as if freedom were possible, as if I could do anything more than survive, as if there were a world beyond this plantation where I could be something other than a runaway slave with a price on my head. But I understood him. He meant, do not let them kill your spirit. Do not let them turn you into nothing. Do not let them win. And in that moment, I made my choice. I would live, and I would make them pay. Robert Caldwell lit the torch. His father handed it to him himself, making it a family ritual, turning murder into tradition, calling it a rite of passage. The torch was pine soaked in pitch, burning bright and fierce. Robert raised it high so everyone could see, making sure the lesson was clear. Then he pressed it against Samuel's oil-soaked clothes. The flames caught at once. They spread faster than I imagined fire could travel, racing up Samuel's body like a living, hungry thing. His clothes burned first, then his skin. The smell struck moments later. That terrible odor of burning flesh and hair that I had never known before, and will never forget. It was sweet and wrong, and it made my stomach twist, but I could not look away because I had promised with my eyes that I would watch, that I would bear witness, that Samuel would not die alone. He screamed. God help me, he screamed. I thought he might remain silent, might deny them even that, but pain like that cannot be endured without sound. It is not human. So he screamed, and I counted the seconds. 47 seconds of agony before his throat closed, or his lungs failed, or his mind shut down from the torment. 47 seconds that felt like 47 years. 47 seconds that will echo in my nightmares until the day I die. After that, there was only the crackle of flames, the stench of burning flesh, and the sound of the Caldwell family walking back toward their house, calmly discussing what they would eat for dinner. They walked away as if they had finished simple labor, as if they had done nothing more serious than prune a tree or brand cattle, as if they had not murdered a man for a crime he never committed. They left his body hanging on that tree for 3 days as a warning. 3 long days while birds circled overhead, and the air turned colder, and Samuel's remains became something less than human, which I suppose was their intention, to show us what we were, how easily we could be reduced, how little we mattered. On the 3rd day, they finally cut him down and allowed me to bury what was left in the slave cemetery behind the tobacco barn. There was not much to bury, mostly bone and ash, pieces of the man I loved, reduced to fragments small enough to hold in my hands. I placed him in the earth myself. I refused help. I needed to do this final act for him. I dug the grave with a shovel that had planted cotton and tobacco and all the crops that had made the Caldwells wealthy. I dug into the hard November soil until my hands split and bled. I laid what remained of Samuel into that ground and covered him with Mississippi dirt that had absorbed the sweat of enslaved people for generations. As I pressed the soil flat and marked the place with a simple wooden cross, something inside me ended and something else began. It was not rage. Rage burns hot and loud, and quickly fades. This was colder, clearer. This was calculation. This was purpose. This was a decision formed in the deepest part of my soul, a place no master could reach, a place no master could reach, a place no chain could bind, where I was still myself and capable of choice. They had taken everything from me. Now I would take everything from them, but I would not kill them. No, death was too simple. Death was mercy. Death was what they deserved, which meant it was too kind. I would do something worse. I would leave them alive to watch everything they valued turn to ash, just as I had watched Samuel burn. I would strip them of their wealth, their pride, their safety, their sense of control. I would make them understand, if only for one night, what it meant to be powerless, to watch something you love destroyed while you stand helpless. And then I would vanish, and they would spend the rest of their lives glancing over their shoulders, wondering if I would return, wondering if any smile from any slave hid the same cold purpose, wondering if they would ever truly be safe again. The Caldwell plantation was among the wealthiest in Mississippi. 3,000 acres of rich cotton land worked by those 147 enslaved souls. The main house stood as proof of wealth taken from suffering, a huge Greek Revival mansion with white columns and wide verandas filled with furniture shipped from Europe and artwork purchased in New Orleans. 20 rooms of luxury built upon a foundation of misery. But their fortune was not only in cotton. Though cotton ruled everything, Master Caldwell had diversified. As he liked to boast at dinner gatherings, he had invested in river trade, in warehouses along the Mississippi, in shares of shipping companies that carried cotton north and returned with manufactured goods. He kept detailed ledgers in a locked study, numbers that represented lives measured in profit and loss. He believed himself clever, modern, untouchable. And on this Christmas Eve, as candles glow in every window and laughter fills these polished halls, he believes he is safe. He believes his empire is secure. He believes the people who serve him are broken. He is wrong. Considered himself a modern businessman, not simply a planter, but an ambitious entrepreneur. And that meant he had 4 strong pillars supporting his empire, 4 streams of wealth that made him one of the most powerful men in Natchez. The first was the cotton warehouse. It stood on the eastern edge of the property, a huge wooden building 100 feet long and 50 feet wide, filled from floor to ceiling with cotton bales wrapped in rough burlap. He stored not only his own crop, but also cotton from smaller planters who paid him for the service. 2 full years of cotton sat inside that structure. $80,000 in raw material waiting for spring prices to climb. At 1854 rates, that amount was a fortune, enough to buy a modest plantation, enough to purchase 100 slaves, enough to truly matter in Mississippi society. The second pillar was the stable. Master Caldwell loved horses the way some men loved whiskey or gambling. He had built a stable 3 years ago that was finer than most slave cabins in the state. It was a handsome building made of pine and oak, with a loft above an attack room that held saddles worth more than a slave's lifetime of labor. 12 racing horses lived there, each one valuable in its own right. But the shining jewel was Thunderstrike, a black stallion who had won $5,000 at the Natchez races the previous spring. Those horses were his pride, his path to social honor, his favorite subject at dinner gatherings. Men envied his horses. They gave him a status even money alone could not secure. The third pillar was the tobacco barn, older than the stable, built 20 years earlier from oak that had aged into a silvery gray. It stood near the slave cemetery where Samuel now rested. Inside, hundreds of tobacco leaves hung from wooden racks, drying in carefully managed airflow. Master Caldwell had learned the skill of tobacco curing from a Cuban man he met in New Orleans, and his tobacco brought premium prices in Europe. $10,000 worth of cured leaf hung in that barn, waiting for spring shipment to England and France. The fourth pillar was the bridge. It seemed small compared to the others, just a plain wooden structure crossing Miller's Creek, yet it was essential. It was the only route for vehicles to enter or leave the plantation from the main road. Without it, they were cut off, isolated, unable to seek help, unable to flee, unable to do anything but stand and watch if disaster came. 4 pillars, 4 sources of wealth and pride and power. And over the next month, I studied each one the way a general studies a battlefield, learning every detail, searching for every weakness, planning destruction down to the smallest piece. I began with the cotton warehouse. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I was sent there carrying lunch for Marcus and Peter, the 2 slaves assigned to maintain it. My duty was to bring them food, make sure they were working, and report back if anything seemed out of place. This gave me access. This gave me opportunity. This gave me knowledge. The building was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. Waiting for a spark. Dry cotton, dry timber, poor airflow, and a roof that leaked just enough to keep everything at the perfect dryness for burning. The front entrance faced the house, a wide double door secured at night with a simple iron bolt on the outside. The back had a loading door for wagons, also bolted from the outside. Those bolts were meant to stop slaves from stealing cotton to sell in town. A fear that showed how little the Caldwells understood the people they owned, as if we would risk torture and death for a few pounds of fiber. I memorized every detail. The stacks of cotton bales rose to the ceiling, leaving narrow paths between them. Oil lamps hung from hooks at regular spaces for the rare nights of work. Burlap sacks and coils of rope lay in corners. The wooden floor was stained dark from years of cotton dust, mixed with spilled lamp oil. I noticed that the northwest corner farthest from both doors had a cracked window board that allowed just enough air to create a steady draft. In my mind, I pictured it burning. I saw flames beginning in that northwest corner, catching the dry cotton, racing through the tight stacks, feeding on decades of oil soaked into the boards, growing hot enough to make the entire structure collapse inward. I saw those bolted doors trapping the fire inside, letting it grow wild before anyone could stop it. I saw $80,000 turn into smoke, while the Caldwell family stood at their mansion windows, helpless. Next were the stables. I knew those horses better than I knew most people. I had worked in those stalls for 5 years before being moved to house duties, cleaning stalls, brushing glossy coats, and learning to read the moods of animals that lived better than enslaved men and women. 12 horses, each one named and cared for. Thunderstrike, the black stallion with the white star on his brow. Lady Belle, a chestnut mare with a gentle spirit. Duke, Napoleon, soldier, princess, traveler, storm, midnight, ruby, diamond, and captain. I knew them all. The stable was newer, only 3 years old, built from pine boards that still leaked sap during warm days. The building was long and rectangular, with stalls on both sides and a broad aisle down the center. At the far end, the tack room held saddles, bridles, and blankets worth thousands. Above everything, a loft stored winter feed, reached by a ladder at the back. There were 2 entrances, the large front doors facing the house, closed and bolted at night, and the rear doors facing the pasture, left unbolted for fast evacuation if fire broke out. The irony of that detail struck me sharply. They had better fire plans for horses than for the 147 souls sleeping in the quarters. Horses could be saved quickly. Slaves were expected to fend for themselves or burn. I studied the hayloft most carefully. Tons of dry hay, packed tightly together. Perfect fuel. The loft floor was made of rough boards with spaces between them, so any fire above would rain embers into the stalls below. And a hay fire burned fierce and fast, too fast to control once it caught. In my mind, I say, flames in that loft, spreading through the hay, dropping burning pieces into the stalls, setting straw bedding alight, sending terrified horses crashing through the open rear doors if they had sense enough, or dying where they stood if they did not. I saw Thunderstrike, the pride of the Caldwell stable, racing wild into the dark. I saw Robert Caldwell, the man who had lit Samuel's pyre, trying in vain to save horses while his father's wealth turned to ash. The tobacco barn demanded different thought. It was older, built from oak hardened by years of weather, less easy to burn than the pine stable or cotton warehouse. But inside, hundreds of tobacco leaves hung drying. Each leaf coated in natural oils that made Mississippi tobacco prized by European buyers. Those oils were flammable. not explosive like cotton, but slow-burning and intense, producing thick smoke that would choke and blacken everything. The barn had 3 entrances, a main door facing the dirt road, and 2 smaller side doors for ventilation. All had simple wooden latches, no locks. No one feared slaves stealing tobacco. Where would we sell it? Who would buy from us? Inside, wooden racks ran the length of the building, each holding dozens of leaves hung by their stems. Walking between them felt like moving through a forest of brown and gold. The leaves rustled with every shift of air. The scent was heavy and earthy, almost overwhelming if you remained too long. I knew that once a tobacco fire began, it would burn for hours, the leaves and racks feeding the flames slowly but steadily, sending smoke visible for miles. In my mind, I saw that barn burning from the inside outward, smoke pouring through every crack, $10,000 of cured tobacco reduced to gray ash, the simplest target, yet perhaps the cruelest. It was the plantation's link to the world beyond, the path for cotton wago. Yes, supply carts, visitors, and most importantly, escape or rescue during danger. It crossed Miller's Creek at the southern boundary, where the road from Natchez entered Caldwell land. The bridge was old, built before I arrived, made from oak beams and pine planks, 30 feet long and wide enough for a wagon, with railings on either side. It stood about 6 feet above the creek, which ran shallow most of the year but became wild during spring floods. The bridge rested on 2 systems of support, long beams beneath and crossbeams connecting them to the plank deck above. Every part was wood. Every part would burn. Without it, the plantation became an island. Anyone wishing to come or go would have to cross the creek on horseback or by foot, impossible for wagons and difficult even for riders, especially in darkness or storm. In my mind, I saw that bridge burning, the middle section collapsing into Miller's Creek with a crash and splash, cutting off the Caldwell family from help, from escape, from any chance of saving their property. I saw them trapped in their mansion, watching flames rise on every side, powerless as their empire fell. 4 targets, 4 pillars of the Caldwell empire. I would strike all 4 at once at midnight on Christmas, when every soul was asleep, when stomachs were full of holiday food and rum, when guards were careless, when they felt safest and most blessed. But planning destruction is only half the struggle. The other half is living with yourself while you smile and serve supper to people you mean to ruin. December dragged by like a wounded animal, each day stretching longer than the one before. Every morning I woke in my small room beside the kitchen, a privilege for trusted house slaves, separate from the crowded quarters where most enslaved people slept in tight cabins. My room measured 8 feet by 8 feet, barely enough space for a narrow bed, a sma, old trunk for my few belongings, and a chair by the wall. Yet, it was considered comfort. It was considered reward, and each night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I counted the days until Christmas, until midnight, until fire would rewrite everything. 10 feet wide, with a narrow bed, a small wooden chest that held my few belongings, and a single window that faced the oak tree where Samuel had died. I woke up every morning to that sight. I fell asleep every night with that same view before my eyes. It reminded me each day why I was doing this. Every morning I put on my gray work dress and my white apron, the uniform of a house slave who was called trustworthy and civilized. Every day I braided my hair carefully and pinned it up neat and proper. Every day I walked into the big house kitchen and began the endless cycle of cooking and serving and scrubbing that shaped my whole existence. And every single day, I smiled. Mistress Evelyn noticed my brighter mood in the 2nd week of December. She was a thin woman with hollow cheeks and cold gray eyes, known across the county for her strict control of the house slaves. She believed in discipline and order, and in frequent punishment for even the smallest mistakes. She had slapped me more times than I could remember over the years, often for imagined faults, like not curtsying quickly enough or daring to lift my eyes to hers, instead of keeping them lowered. "Ruth, you seem cheerful this morning," she said while I served her breakfast. She sat at the small table in the morning room, eating eggs and toast while reading a letter from her sister in Charleston. "Yes, ma'am," I answered, pouring her coffee with steady hands. "Christ is coming. It is a blessed season." "Indeed it is," she replied, sipping lightly. "The celebration of our Lord's birth, the reminder of God's mercy and love. Though I suppose you people cannot fully understand its spiritual meaning. Your understanding of Christianity is naturally more simple." "Yes, ma'am," I said softly, keeping my voice gentle and obedient, each word a lie wrapped in agreement. Inside, I thought about the Christmas gift I would give her family. I thought about how they would spend every Christmas after this one remembering it, never able to celebrate again without tasting ash in their mouths. The family was planning a large Christmas gathering, their yearly tradition. Master Caldwell's 3 brothers would come with their families, filling the house with noise and money and careless happiness. 8 adults in total: Master Caldwell and Mistress Evelyn, James Caldwell and his wife Margaret, Thomas Caldwell and his wife Sarah, William Caldwell and his wife Catherine, and 15 children from 4 years old to 17. The next generation of slaveholders learning how to command and control other human beings. 23 people who would go to bed on Christmas night, surrounded by comfort, and wake up to something very different. Preparations filled the house all through December. Mistress Evelyn wanted everything flawless. The silver had to be polished until it shone like mirrors. The floors had to be scrubbed and waxed. Every window had to sparkle without a streak. Guest rooms were prepared with fresh linens and winter flowers. The menu was planned carefully, and ingredients were ordered from town. I threw myself into the work with energy that surprised everyone. Ruth has truly embraced the Christmas spirit. I heard Mistress Evelyn tell her husband one evening, "Perhaps Samuel's death taught her proper humility," she added. Master Caldwell nodded with approval. "Discipline and consequences, my dear. They are the foundation of a well-run plantation." I kept polishing the silver and smiled. On December 15th, I made my first quiet preparation for the fires. I asked permission to buy kerosene for the house lamps, a normal duty for the head house slaves. Mistress Evelyn agreed without suspicion. I rode the wagon to town with old Jessie, who drove for the family, and we bought 2 large jars of kerosene from the general store. I also purchased extra lamp wicks, candles, and other small supplies to hide my true purpose. On the way back, I hid 1 jar of kerosene behind the tobacco barn, wrapped in burlap, and tucked beneath a loose board where no one would look. The other jar I carried into the house and placed in its usual spot. No one questioned it. No one doubted me. I was Ruth, the trusted house slave, the grieving widow, the obedient servant. On December 18th, I made my second preparation. I asked for permission to visit Samuel's grave to mark 3 weeks since his death with prayer. Feeling generous because of the season, Mistress Evelyn allowed it. She even handed me a small prayer book to take along. A kindness she probably believed showed her charity. I walked slowly to the slave cemetery behind the tobacco barn, moving like a widow still deep in sorrow. Once I was out of sight of the big house, I retrieved my hidden jar of kerosene and carefully examined the barn. I noted which side door had the weakest latch, which corner stayed most hidden from view, and where a fire could begin unnoticed until it grew too strong to stop. I knelt in the cold dirt and spoke to him. I told him what I was planning. I asked his forgiveness if I was wrong. I asked for his strength if I was right. I asked for his strength if I was right. The wooden cross I had made stood crooked in the ground, already worn by rain and wind. I straightened it and promised him that his death would not be forgotten, that the Caldwells would pay, that justice, even if imperfect, would come. On December 21st, I made my third preparation. I have preferred to bring lunch to Marcus and Peter at the cotton warehouse, something I had done many times before. While they ate, I walked through the warehouse slowly, studying everything. I noticed the placement of oil lamps, the narrow spaces between the tall stacks of cotton, and the broken board in the northwest window that allowed a draft inside. I loosened the bolts on both doors, moving the metal back and forth until the threads were worn just enough. The bolts would still slide into place and look secure, but they could be forced open from the inside if someone tried hard enough. I was not a monster. If anyone found themselves trapped when the fire came, I wanted them to have at least a chance. From the outside, the doors would appear tightly fastened. On December 23rd, I made my final preparation. I walked around the plantation in the afternoon, carrying a basket of mending, as if I was searching for better light. In truth, I was planning my path for Christmas Eve, from the kitchen door to the bridge, from the bridge to the tobacco barn, from the barn to the stables, from the stables to the cotton warehouse, from the warehouse into the swamp and away. I timed each part, walking at the speed I would use at night. I checked what could be seen from the main house and found places to hide if someone noticed me. The full route would take about 45 minutes if I moved quickly and carefully. 45 minutes to change my life forever. 45 minutes to bring down an empire. Christmas Eve came with cold, clear weather. The temperature dropped below freezing during the night, leaving frost on the grass that shone in the morning sunlight. Perfect weather for fire, with no rain to dampen the wood. A wind from the west would carry flames away from the main house and toward the edges of the property where my targets waited. The family began arriving at noon. Carriages all led up the long drive. Horses' breath rose in white clouds in the winter air. Wheels crushed against the oyster shell road that led from the gate to the house. Children jumped out shouting, running across the frosted lawn with the carefree joy of those who had never known true suffering. The adults stepped down more slowly, weighed down by thick coats and heavier pride. Master James Caldwell arrived first, with his wife Margaret, and their 4 children. James, the oldest brother at 50, was even wealthier than the others, owning a plantation twice this size in Warren County. Margaret was a small woman, who spoke little, but watched everything with sharp eyes. Master Thomas arrived next, with his wife Sarah, and their 5 children. Thomas, 48, was the most religious of the brothers, known for forcing his slaves to attend Sunday services, where he preached about obedience and the curse of Ham. Sarah had once been beautiful, but now she drank sherry in secret and grew sharper with every glass. Master William came last with his wife Catherine and their 6 children. William, 45, the youngest brother, laughed the loudest and drank the hardest, and enjoyed the whip more than any of them. Catherine pretended not to see her husband's cruelty, lost in a world of novels and quiet dreams. 23 people, 8 adults who supported slavery through action or silent agreement. 15 children being raised to continue it. Not one of them would die that night, but all of them would remember this Christmas for the rest of their lives. I welcomed each family at the door, taking coats and guiding children to the parlor, where gifts lay under a tall pine tree cut from the north woods. My hands did not shake. My smile did not break. Inside, I counted the hours. 8 hours until midnight. 8 hours until justice. 8 hours until I became someone new. The afternoon passed in a rush of service. I helped prepare tea and cookies for the children. I carried trunks to guest rooms. I checked that every bathroom had fresh towels and soap. I smiled and curtsied and said, "Yes, my ma'am," and "No, sir," playing the part I had perfected over 23 years. At 6 o'clock, we served Christmas Eve dinner. The dining table had been extended to its full length to seat all 23 guests. Crystal glasses caught the glow of candlelight from the chandelier above. Silver shone brightly against white tablecloths, white china, and folded white napkins. It was a picture of wealth and Christmas cheer, of everything they believed was good and right in their world. The meal was grand. I had spent 2 full days preparing it with Martha and Beulah, the other house slaves. Roasted goose brushed with orange glaze, honey-glazed ham, sweet potatoes baked with brown sugar and pecans, collard greens cooked slowly with bacon, cornbread made from buttermilk, cranberry sauce, pickled vegetables, 3 kinds of pie, pecan, sweet potato, and apple. Everything flawless, everything beautiful, Everything beautiful, everything hiding the truth that the woman serving them was counting down the minutes to their reckoning. Destruction. I served each course with perfect grace. I refilled wine glasses. I carried heavy platters from the kitchen. I carved the goose right at the table, a skill Mistress Evelyn had taught me many years before. I answered every question with yes, sir, and no, ma'am, and I watched Master James boast about his cotton harvest, 800 bales this year, the finest crop in Warren County. I watched Master Thomas say a prayer before the meal, thanking God for his gifts and asking for more success. I watched Master William drink too much wine and grow loud and improper, joking about a slave woman he had sold last month for refusing his advances. I watched Mistress Evelyn fix her youngest son's pale manners with a sharp pinch to his arm beneath the table. I watched Robert Caldwell, the man who had lit Samuel's funeral pyre, flirt with his cousin Charlotte across the table, both young and beautiful and completely free of guilt. I watched 15 children laugh and play and argue and eat, innocent of their parents' sins, yet being trained each day to carry them on. I watched them and felt a brief moment of doubt. They were children. They had not chosen this system. They had been born into it, just as I had been born into it, just as I had been born into slavery. But then I remembered that Robert Caldwell had once been a child as well, that Master Caldwell and his brothers had once been innocent boys, that every slaveholder began as a child who learned cruelty from parents who believed it was normal. And I remembered that these children would grow up to own people, to whip people, to sell people, to burn people alive for imagined crimes, unless something changed, unless someone showed them that actions bring consequences, unless someone taught them that slaves were human beings who could fight back. So I hardened my heart and continued serving dinner, counting the hours until midnight. Ruth, Master Caldwell called during the main course, his voice cheerful with wine and holiday cheer. You seem happy tonight. That's good to see. You've been through a hard time. The table grew a little quieter, everyone looking at me with mild interest, the way one might look at a dog that had learned a clever trick. I set down the wine decanter and folded my hands in front of me, a pose of humility and respect. Yes, sir. I am very happy. This will be a Christmas none of us will ever forget. He laughed, pleased. That's the spirit. See, everyone, even in sorrow, the spirit of Christmas can heal. This is what good Christian guidance does. This is what proper discipline and care can achieve. We take care of our people, and they answer with loyalty. The table murmured in agreement and returned to eating. Master Thomas nodded in a holy way. Master James lifted his wine glass in praise of his brother's wisdom. Master William laughed too loudly and made a rough joke about slave loyalty that made the women blush and the men grin. If they had looked closer, they might have seen that my smile never reached my eyes. They might have noticed that my hands, folded in humility, were too steady for someone said to be full of emotion. They might have wondered why I kept glancing at the grandfather clock in the corner of the room. They might have felt the cold purpose coming from me like winter air. But they did not look closely. They never did. To them, we were furniture. Useful, obedient furniture that smiled and served and suffered without sound. They could not imagine that furniture might think, might plan, might hate them, with a calm clarity that made my earlier grief seem small. 7 hours until midnight. After dinner, the family moved to the parlor to exchange gifts and sing carols. Their voices drifted through the house. Silent night. O come all ye faithful. Joy to the world. Hark the herald angels sing songs about peace and mercy and the love of God. Songs sung by people who had watched a man burn alive 3 weeks ago and felt nothing but satisfaction. I stood in the kitchen washing dishes and hummed along. Joy to the world indeed. At 10 o'clock, the children were sent to bed in different rooms across the second floor. At 11, the adults finally retired, full of food and rum and Christmas cheer. The house grew quiet, except for the soft sounds of old wood settling in the cold and the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Midnight came closer. I waited in my small room beside the kitchen, dressed in dark clothes I had prepared for this night. I had already packed a bundle, one change of clothes, food, stolen little by little over weeks, a kitchen knife, matches, and the small jar of kerosene I had brought into the house. I had hidden a second jar behind the tobacco barn earlier that day. Everything was ready. At 1:45, I slipped out through the kitchen door. The night was cold and bright with moonlight, enough light to see, but not enough to be easily seen. My breath formed small white clouds. Somewhere far away, an owl cried. The plantation slept, unaware that its world was about to change forever. I moved, like a shadow, toward the bridge. First, it was the farthest point, and I needed to cut off their escape before anything else. My feet knew the path even in the dark. Years of walking these grounds had made them as familiar as my own skin. The grass crunched under my shoes, stiff and brittle with frost. The bridge rose ahead, a dark shape stretching over Miller's Creek. The water below flowed slowly, black and silver in the moonlight. I walked to the center and pulled out my jar of kerosene and my matches. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. My heart beat slow and even. I felt no anger. I felt no hesitation. I felt only purpose. I poured kerosene over the center support beams, along the railings, across the wooden planks. The smell was sharp in the cold air, the same oil scent they had poured over Samuel. Fitting, poetic, justice. Then I struck a match. The tiny flame shone bright in the darkness, like a small star between my fingers. For a brief second, I paused. This was the moment from which there was no return. Light this fire, and I would become something new, something dangerous, someone they would hunt until they captured me or I died. I remembered Samuel's eyes in his final moments. Life free, I dropped the match. The fire caught slowly at first, licking at the kerosene-soaked wood, testing its fuel. Then it grew bolder, spreading along the rails, dropping to the support beams, climbing higher. Within seconds, flames raced along the center of the bridge. The wood was old and dry and hungry. It burned eagerly, crackling loudly in the cold night. I did not stay to watch. I had 3 more places to reach, and little time. I ran toward the tobacco barn, my second target, my feet guiding me along paths I had memorized. The slave cemetery appeared first. Samuel's grave lay as a dark shape in the moonlight. I paused for only a moment. Watch this, my love. Watch me tear down their empire. Watch me give you justice. I retrieved the hidden jar of kerosene and slipped into the tobacco barn through the side door with the loose latch. Inside, the darkness was complete. The hanging tobacco leaves rustled softly in the draft from the open door, whispering in the blackness. I stood still, letting my eyes adjust, remembering where everything stood. Then I moved between the rows, pouring kerosene over leaves and racks and across the wooden floor. The tobacco drank it in, ready to burn long and hot. I worked fast but carefully, making sure each section would catch. At the doorway, I poured a final line of kerosene leading outside. I struck another match and dropped it onto the trail. The fire rushed inward like a living thing, eager to feed. Within moments, the first leaves caught flame. Fire climbed the racks. Smoke rose thick and black. The barn filled with fire so quickly it felt unreal, as if it had waited years for this night. I shut the door behind me and hurried toward the stables, my third target. By now, the burning bridge could be seen from the main house, a growing orange glow at the edge of the property. I likely had only 2 minutes before someone woke and noticed. I had to move quickly. The stables smelled of hay and horse and leather, familiar scents from my years working there. 12 animals shifted in their stalls, sensing danger. They snorted and stamped, uneasy, but not yet wild with fear. I went to the rear doors first and pulled them wide open, creating a path to the pasture. Then I climbed the ladder to the loft. I had struggled with this choice more than any other. The horses were innocent. They had not burned Samuel. They had done nothing wrong. They were animals caught in human cruelty, but they were also the most valuable and beloved part of Master Caldwell's. His pride, his place among racing men and rich planters. Without them, he would lose more than money. He would lose honor. In the end, I chose this. Give them a chance to escape, but burn the stable anyway. Open the doors, let them run if they could, but destroy the building and all within it. Let God or fate decide which ones survived. It was more mercy than the Caldwells had ever given anyone. I poured kerosene over hay bales, across the loft floor, along the rafters. The fumes stung my eyes. My hands moved quickly until the jar was empty. I climbed down, struck a match, and threw it up into the loft. The hay burst into flames with a loud whoosh that startled even me. Fire spread across the loft so fast I barely had time to reach the stalls. I flung open each door, slapped each horse's flank, shouted at them to run. Get out. Save yourselves. Most raced toward the open rear doors, their instincts strong even in fear. Thunderstrike, the prize stallion, reared and screamed, then bolted, his black coat shining in the firelight as he vanished into the dark. Lady Belle and Duke followed, then Napoleon and Soldier, Princess and Traveler. But Storm and Midnight ran the wrong way, toward the main stable doors, confused by smoke and terror. Ruby froze inside her stall. Diamond and Captain collided while trying to escape, legs tangling in panic. I could not save them anymore. I had given them a chance. That was far more mercy than the Caldwells had ever given Samuel. I ran from the blazing stable toward my final mark, the cotton warehouse, the shining jewel of Caldwell. Behind me, I heard the first cries from the big house. Someone had noticed the flames. Now there were many voices, confused and afraid. Who is there? Fire. Dear God, fire everywhere. Bring water. Get the slaves. Ring the bell. The plantation bell began to ring, the alarm that called everyone in times of trouble. But it was already too late. My fires were too large, too many, and too carefully set to be stopped. The cotton warehouse rose ahead of me, huge in the glow from the other burning buildings. This would be the last strike. $80,000 in cotton. 2 full years of harvest, the base of everything they owned. I ran first to the back-loading door, pulled the outside bolt shut, and wedged it tight with a piece of wood I had hidden there earlier. The bolt looked firm, yet it could still be broken from inside if someone was trapped. Then I moved around to the front entrance. The shouting from the house was louder now, closer. Shapes running in night clothes. I had only seconds left with the rest of my kerosene around the front door, soaking the wood, covering the frame. My hands trembled at last from weariness and from the weight of what I had done. I struck my final match with fingers that suddenly felt slow and awkward. The door was old pine, dry as dust, uncovered in kerosene. It caught at once. Flames leaped up and spread across it like a living creature climbing toward the sky. I heard the fire slipping through cracks, moving inside toward the tall stacks of cotton that would burn for days, creating heat so fierce it would melt metal and turn wood into smoke. Someone is at the warehouse. A shout rose from near the house. A man's voice. Maybe Robert Caldwell or one of his uncles. They had seen me. It was time to leave. But first, there would be one last message. I ran toward the house where the family poured out in robes and nightclothes, confused and frightened and unready for what was happening. They rushed toward the flames, not looking behind them, trying to understand how everything could burn at once. I slipped around to the front door of their precious home, the only building I had chosen to spare, and pulled out a piece of charcoal I had saved from the kitchen stove. On the white, painted door I wrote in large letters, "Merry Christmas." You burned one man. I burned one empire. Justice Ruth. Then I ran for my life. I ran toward the slave cabins, but not to hide. That would be the first place they would search when they understood the truth. Instead, I ran past them, toward the woods beyond, toward the swamp, at the north edge of the land that most people avoided. The same swamp where I had been born before being sold to the Caldwells at 15. I knew every trail, every patch of firm ground, every hiding place. Behind me the night turned orange and red and gold. 4 fires burned now, lighting the sky like daylight. The sounds chased me, crackling flames, horses screaming, men shouting, women crying. Rising above it all was a cry of pain. I knew as Master Caldwell, realizing then the size of his loss. I ran until my lungs ached, and my lungs ached, and my legs shook. I ran until I reached the edge of the swamp, where solid earth turned into water, and mud, and cypress trees standing like guards. From there I could see the whole plantation spread below. The cotton warehouse was swallowed in fire, flames shooting 70 feet into the air, so bright it hurt my eyes. The stables burned hard, the roof falling inward with a crash that sent sparks twisting upward. The tobacco barn stood like a frame of fire, its walls still up, but everything inside gone. At the far edge of the land, the bridge glowed like a dying ember. The middle part had already fallen into Miller's Creek with a hiss of steam and smoke. The main house stood untouched in the center of the ruin, lit by the flames around it, like a scene from the Book of Revelation. I could see the family in their night clothes, tiny as insects from that distance, running from place to place, trying to save something, anything, trying to understand how their perfect Christmas had turned into disaster. There was nothing left to save. I had planned too carefully. I had struck too exactly. I had broken the 4 pillars that held their empire, and now they could only watch it fall. Then I heard it, a sound that filled me with more satisfaction than anything in my 38 years. The voice of Master Caldwell shouting my name across the burning fields, shouting it again and again like a curse, like a prayer, like a question with no answer. Ruth, Ruth, where are you? Ruth. His voice cracked on the last cry, breaking with rage or sorrow or disbelief. He knew. They all knew. The words on the door had made it plain. This was no accident, no lightning strike, no fallen lamp. This was Ruth, the trusted house slave, the grieving widow, the woman they had forced to watch her husband burn. She had done to, is. She had destroyed them and vanished into the night like smoke. I allowed myself one small smile in the dark. Then I turned and walked deeper into the swamp, toward freedom, toward whatever life waited beyond Mississippi, beyond slavery, beyond the reach of the Caldwell family and their burning empire. The swamp was cold and dark and full of danger, but it belonged to me. I had been born there before my mother was sold away, and I was given to the Caldwells. I knew which path stayed firm and which would pull you down to your waist in mud. I knew where snakes slept in winter and where the deep channels flowed. I knew how to move without sound through shallow water, and how to hide in hollow logs, and how to cover my scent with mud and crushed leaves. I walked through the night, guiding myself north by the stars, placing more distance between me and the plantation. Behind me the plantation, behind me the orange light faded, but never vanished fully. Those fires would burn for days. The cotton warehouse, most of all, would smolder for a week, too hot to approach, too vast to put out. When dawn rose on Christmas morning, I was 5 miles away, hidden inside a hollow cypress log near the old river road. From that hiding place I watched the sun climb over Mississippi, painting the sky pink and gold. Somewhere behind me smoke still lifted into the air. Somewhere behind me the Caldwell family was counting their losses and understanding the full weight of what I had done. I ate a piece of cornbread from my bundle and allowed myself to feel not joy, not celebration, but deep, steady satisfaction. They would never forget this Christmas. They would never forget Ruth. Every candle, every lamp, every flame would remind them. Every trusted slave would seem a possible danger in their minds. Every smile would hide the thought of revenge. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything while standing, helpless. I had done that, and now I would disappear, as they would spend their lives looking over their shoulders, wondering if I would return to finish what I began. I stayed hidden for 3 days, moving only at night, drinking from streams, eating what food I had saved, keeping away from roads and towns and people. On the fourth day, weak and hungry, I made a careful choice. I went toward a small farm outside Woodville, Mississippi. I had chosen it long ago during trips to town with Mistress Evelyn. It was small and poor-looking, owned by a man I had seen wearing the gray coat and wide hat often worn by Quakers. Quakers were against slavery. Not all would help a runaway, but some would. It was my only hope. I knocked at twilight. A middle-aged man opened the door, thin and worn by work, with gentle eyes and rough hands. He looked at me, at my torn, muddy dress, at the need in my face, and his eyes widened in recognition. He had heard. Of course he had heard. The whole state had heard by then. The story would be everywhere. A slave woman burns the Caldwell plantation on Christmas. The tale would grow with each telling. The fires set at once, the bridge destroyed, the family forced to watch their wealth burn. The message on the door with my name. "Please," I said softly. My voice was hoarse from 3 days of silence. "I need help." He looked at me for a long moment that felt endless. I saw the struggle in his eyes, fear against faith, safety against conscience. If he helped me and was discovered, he could lose everything. If he turned me away, he would carry that choice forever. "Come inside," he said at last, quickly. His name was William Foster. He and his wife, Emma, were part of the Underground Railroad, the secret chain of homes and hidden paths that guided escaped slaves north to free states. For 7 years they had done this risky work, hiding runaways in their cellar and moving them by night. They had heard about the Caldwell fire. Everyone had. The news reached Woodville within hours, carried by travelers and spreading like the flames. The details were mixed with rumor, but the truth was clear. The Caldwell plantation burned on Christmas Eve. 4 main buildings destroyed at once. A slave woman named Ruth responsible. "You are either the bravest woman in Mississippi or the most foolish," William said, while Emma warmed water for a bath and prepared food. "Maybe both." "I am a widow," I answered too, tired for more words. I was not brave or foolish. I was finished. They hid me in their cellar for 2 weeks, while search parties moved through the countryside. The Caldwell family had offered $500 for my capture, dead or alive. $500, more money than many people would ever see. That reward brought out every slave catcher and bounty hunter within miles. Slave catcher, bounty hunter, and greedy farmer working between Nashville and Louisiana. They searched homes, barns, churches, and shops. They questioned every slave and every free black person they saw. They chased every rumor and checked every reported sighting. But I was fortunate. William and Emma Foster were experienced in this risky work. They had hidden many runaways over the years and had never lost a single one. Their cellar had a false wall that made a narrow hidden space just big enough for 2 people. They placed potatoes and turnips in front of it. Even if someone searched the cellar, they would see only vegetables and winter supplies. I spent those 2 weeks in darkness and silence, listening to footsteps overhead, hearing low voices as searchers came and questioned William, holding my breath while they checked his barn and other buildings. But they never discovered the hidden space. They never guessed that a Quaker farmer would risk everything to hide the most wanted fugitive in Mississippi. During those long days, Emma brought me news from town. The details of my destruction became clearer with every report. The cotton warehouse had burned fully to its foundation. $80,000 worth of cotton turned to ash. The insurance claim was refused because the fire was clearly arson. Total loss. The stables had burned completely. Of the 12 horses, only 7 survived. Thunderstrike, the pride of the Caldwell racing stable, had broken his leg while running into the night and had to be shot. The other 4 died in the fire, trapped by smoke and fear. Total loss of Master Caldwell racing hopes and breeding stock. At least another $20,000 gone. The tobacco barn and everything inside it was reduced to ash. $10,000 of fine-cured tobacco, ready for European export, destroyed so completely that nothing remained but blackened ground. The bridge collapse had cut off the plantation for almost 3 weeks. They had to cross Miller Creek on horseback, impossible for wagons and hard even for riders. By the time they built a temporary crossing, the other fires had burned out on their own, leaving nothing to save. The financial estimate was more than $120,000 in losses. In 1854, that was an enormous fortune, equal to millions today. The Caldwell family was not entirely ruined. They still owned 3,000 acres and 147 slaves, but they were weakened, shaken, reduced. Their position in Natchez society fell overnight. Other rich planters sensed weakness and circled like sharks. Business partnerships ended. Credit disappeared. Social invitations stopped. The Caldwell name, once linked with success and power, became linked with weakness and failure. But according to Emma reports, the real harm was in their minds. Master Caldwell became obsessed with capturing me, ignoring his remaining business to focus on revenge. He questioned every slave on the plantation daily, afraid others might copy me. He put locks on everything. He hired extra overseers. He startled at sudden sounds and stopped sleeping through the night. His brothers, who had lost their own property in the fire, returned to their plantations and cut business ties with him, blaming his poor management for the disaster. The Christmas holiday became a terrible memory the family could never escape. According to town gossip, Mistress Evelyn suffered some kind of breakdown on Christmas morning when she read my message on the door. She stayed in her bed and refused to come out for days. Robert Caldwell, the golden son who had lit Samuel's funeral pyre, became quiet and nervous, flinching whenever he saw a house slave. I had wanted them to live with what they had done to Samuel. I had wanted them to feel powerless and afraid. I had succeeded beyond what I imagined, and now it was time to vanish completely. When the searches slowed, William and Emma moved me to the next stop on the Underground Railroad. A blacksmith named Thomas in Liberty, Mississippi, who hid me for a week in his forge loft. Then to a kind Methodist minister in Brookhaven, who kept me in his church basement for 5 days. Then to a freed black woman named Sarah in Jackson, who ran a boarding house and hid runaways in her attic, while slave catchers searched the streets below. At every stop I heard more about the Caldwell fire. The story grew larger each time it was told, becoming legend. Some versions claimed I had burned the main house too, with the family inside. Some said I killed the horses on purpose, cutting their throats before setting the fire. Some said I had help from a secret network of rebel slaves across 3 counties. None of it was true, but I did not correct anyone. Let the legend spread. Let slaveholders across the South hear it, and wonder if their trusted slaves were planning the same. Let them lose sleep. Let them learn that cruelty brings consequences. The Underground Railroad carried me slowly north through Mississippi, then Tennessee, then Kentucky. Each station was a short refuge, a place to rest, eat, and gather strength before moving again. The conductors were black and white, slave and free, Quaker, Methodist, Baptist, and Catholic people who believed slavery was evil and were ready to risk everything to fight it. They sometimes asked me questions. Why did you do it? Was there no other way? Do you regret it? I gave the same answer each time. They burned my husband, Ali, though for a crime he did not commit. I burned their empire and left them alive to remember it. That is justice. Some understood, some did not. I did not care. I was not seeking approval. I had made my choice, and I lived with it. On March 15th, 1855, almost 3 months after Christmas, I crossed the Ohio River into free land. A conductor named Benjamin rowed me across at night, the dark water shining with stars, the northern shore holding everything I had never known. Freedom, safety, the legal standing of a human being instead of property. I stepped onto the riverbank in Ohio and did not feel the joy I expected. I felt empty and numb. Samuel was still dead. My friends were still enslaved. The Caldwells were still alive, still rich enough to survive, still owning 147 human beings. I had won the battle. The war went on. I settled in Cincinnati in the West End, where a community of formerly enslaved people had built a neighborhood of survival and shared support. I chose the surname Freeman, Ruth Freeman, because I could choose my own name. I found work as a seamstress. The years I had spent sewing for the Caldwells now helped me earn my own living. I rented a small room in a boarding house on 7th Street. I built a life, but I never married again. Samuel had been my husband. That part of my life was ashes. Like everything else I had burned private. I did not stay quiet about my past. I shared my story at abolitionist meetings, in church basements, and private homes, in parlors full of white people who wanted to help, but did not truly understand slavery, and at gatherings of formerly enslaved people who understood completely. I told them about Samuel burning while his killers went home to supper. I told them about serving Christmas dinner with a smile to the men who murdered him. I told them about watching an empire burn from the edge of the swamp, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. I told them about the message I left on the door. You burned one man. I burned one empire. Justice. Some called me a hero. Some called me a monster. Many did not know what to call me. I did not care. I was not interested in praise or blame. I wanted them to understand that slavery did not create docile victims. It created human beings with limits. It created resistance. It created people like me, who would burn down the world before living one more day in chains. The Christmas fire of 1854 became legend in certain places. People argued whether my actions were justified, whether destroying property was acceptable, whether I should be honored or condemned. Frederick Douglass mentioned the story in a speech in Boston, calling it an example of the anger slavery always produced. William Lloyd Garrison wrote about it in his newspaper The Liberator, though he criticized my methods while understanding my reason. I did not join those debates. I had made my choice on Christmas Eve 1854 and lived with it every day. Through the Underground Railroad network, I sometimes received news from Mississippi. The Caldwell family,